Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. My name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Brianna, and I don't. And this week we watched Stigmata.
It is a power beyond human comprehension. A force that defies the laws of nature.
Somebody needs to tell me what's going on.
A mystery that is the ultimate incarnation.
There is no scientific explanation
of evil.
Who are you? Il messaggero non è importante.
I just want my life back.
You have an idea who you're dealing with?
Stigmata. Rated R. Starts Friday, September 10th.
Boo. Yeah.
Okay, so those are Jason's introductory thoughts as to how the film was.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a lot over the course of this movie about how bad it is. Right up top, I also just want to apologize. You guys might hear some slightly creepy, heavy panting throughout this episode. As Brianna alluded to on our Instagram, I got COVID. I'm totally fine, but I just get a little out of breath sometimes. Good days, bad days. Today's not the best day, but the show must go on. So you might just hear me take a few more deep breaths, and we normally try to edit out all the breathing, but I think that's going to be a little hard today.
We'll do our best. All right, movie credits. So this was written by Tom Lazarus, which I feel like, is that biblical?
Lazarus, yes. Lazarus was the man that Jesus raised from the dead.
Oh, right.
As one of his miracles,
Spooky. Written also by Rick Ramage, directed by Rupert Wainwright, starring Patricia Arquette, which I did not expect, as Frankie Page, Gabriel Byrne as Father Andrew Kiernan, Jonathan Pryce as Cardinal Daniel Houseman, and Nia Log as Donna Chadway.
And I just want to point out, I did just look it up, and Tom Lazarus is his real name.
Wow.
I looked up Rupert Wainwright a little bit. I don't know if you remember, we talked about this right when we started watching the movie. Rupert Wainwright's most notable career achievements, other than Stigmata, where he directed and produced several MC Hammer music videos, including the movie Please Hammer, Don't Hurt 'Em.
That sounds like porn.
It's probably not porn, because it won a Grammy for Best Long-Form Music Video.
Oh, then yeah, no.
So, I mean, could be, but I'm going to guess not. But yeah, so I mean, you know, if you've ever seen an MC Hammer music video and thought, I want to see this guy direct a scary movie, boy, you're in for a treat.
The summary for Stigmata is Frankie, an atheist from Pittsburgh, struggles through becoming a stigmatic.
Pretty great Nas album for any rap fans out there.
Nas has an album called Stigmatic?
No, it's called Stillmatic. I knew you wouldn't get it, but the joke's not for you.
Though she really becomes possessed by not a demon or devil, but a recently deceased priest.
Whoa, spoilers.
As a catalyst to end corruption in the Catholic Church.
And they succeeded. As you guys know, the Catholic Church today is free of scandal. You know, it's just a really good public entity.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good segue into the top line of my notes here when we get to actually talking about the movie. I should probably just apologize in advance to any Catholics that are listening, because I have so many Catholic Church jokes, and if I were to not say them, I wouldn't talk for most of the episode.
Boy.
I apologize up top. It's in poor taste, I know, but...
Well, I mean, we already offended them because of my Good Friday post, probably.
What was your Good Friday post?
It was just on Instagram about how we did this movie for Jesus.
Oh, yeah, you see how involved I am with our social media, guys?
Thanks for not even looking at it. Wow. All right, so tell us about the Rotten Tomatoes score.
Actually, somewhat respectable audience score of 63%, which was about 64% higher than I would have thought it would be. That's negative 1% for anybody doing the math at home.
I think this movie was not hated initially when it came out.
So by critics, it was 22% on Rotten Tomatoes for critics. 63% audience score. Yeah, it did have a little bit of success at first. People kind of liked it, but I'll get into that shortly.
Well, right now, because it's Flesh Wounds time.
Okay, well, I'll get into that right now. This movie, when it first came out, actually debuted at #1 on its opening weekend, which...
Truly shocking.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the first 4 minutes of this movie, it's a mystery as to why that happened.
It is very of its time. It is deeply 1999.
Oh, this movie is peak 1999. The fashion choices, so many butterfly clips.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it opened at number 1. It ended a run of 5 straight weeks by The Sixth Sense. By the second weekend of its run, though, it would go all the way down to number 4, with The Sixth Sense staying strong at number 3, after being out for almost 2 months at this point.
Wow.
The kind of general consensus from all the reading I've done, and, you know, it makes sense to me, is that The Sixth Sense is given a lot of credit for reviving supernatural horror in a way. You know, we talked about this a little bit, the late 90s, early 2000s. It was kind of a resurgence of the teen slasher, you know, Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Urban Legend, all those fun movies. And then after The Sixth Sense came out, people were like, oh yeah, ghosts are scary. And Stigmata seems to have gotten a little bump from that. You know, obviously it's not necessarily about ghosts, but it is a supernatural horror movie, of which, again, at the time, there weren't a ton. So the general consensus seems to be that the first weekend it performed very well because people just came off The Sixth Sense and they were like, yeah, let's get more of that. And then it fell off dramatically because they were like, oh no, not more of that.
I also wonder, so between The Exorcist and this, were there any other Exorcist-like movies or movies that focused on religion at all?
I'm sure there were some. You know, I'm drawing a bit of a blank right now.
Because all the Exorcist remakes came like after this, I feel like.
Yeah, there were definitely some. I just had to kind of look it up to confirm. But there was a Johnny Depp movie, The Ninth Gate, which was about a book, a satanic book, that came out in 1999, around the same time. There was The Seventh Sign from 1988. Let's see, there was Hellraiser, 1987. Not quite religious, but a little more on the supernatural side. So yeah, there were some, but it definitely wasn't a saturated market at the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so the other fun fact is that in the first half of the movie, there is a scene where Frankie is, quote-unquote, attacked on a subway car. She's riding on the train with her friend. Something happens. She gets her weird biblical visions, and she gets whipped on her back. You know, obviously there's nobody standing there whipping her. These whip marks just appear. But that subway train is the same set that they filmed the subway scenes on Seinfeld on, which I love Seinfeld. Anybody who knows me knows it's one of my favorite shows. We watch it pretty much every night before bed. So that's a nice little ref. And it's also probably like my favorite thing about the movie because it's a short list.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, touch points, I have absolutely none. I had never even heard of this movie, didn't know it existed, nothing.
So I saw it in the theater.
Are you serious?
Oh, absolutely serious. So it was. I'm pretty sure it was with my uncle. Might have been with my dad. For those of you who might be judging me for mixing those two up, they're twins, so it's okay. But I had seen The Sixth Sense in the theaters with my uncle. And this is the same uncle that had all the VHS tapes of horror movies that kind of introduced me to horror. And I was 12 at the time, for reference. But we had seen The Sixth Sense. We really enjoyed that. I did not see the twist coming because I was a literal child. He said he did.
I don't believe him.
And so I think it was just one of those things like, oh, hey, yeah, let's go see another scary movie. It made enough of an impression as a kid that I remember seeing it in the theater, but I have not seen it once since because I think even as a kid, I knew, like, this isn't something that I'm going to want to revisit.
Correct. Let's talk about what a stigmata means in case you don't know. And yes, sure, you have Google, but this is our job to explain the movie. So per Catholic.org, which I assume would be the correct source for this kind of information, it's used by members of the Christian faith to describe bodily marks, sores, or sensations of pain in locations corresponding to the crucifixion wounds of Jesus. It originates from a line at the end of St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. Is that how you say that?
Yeah, that's
okay.
Good. That's good, yeah.
Where he says, I bear on my body the marks of Jesus. It's plural for the Greek word stigma, meaning mark, tattoo, or brand, which I thought was interesting because we still use that word today.
Absolutely, yeah.
Many reported stigmatics are members of the Catholic faith. St. Francis of Assisi is the first reported case. For over 50 years, Padre Pio of Petrosina of the Order of Friars Minor Capuchin. This is very hard language, guys.
I don't even know what words you're saying.
He reported stigmata and his wounds never became infected. Also, a high percentage, quote, perhaps 80%, which is an interesting way to say a statistic, but that's Catholic.org, of all stigmatics are women.
Well, to be fair, Catholic.org's sole focus is not just like information. It also doubles as a dating site for middle school boys.
But wait, I just want to point out the point about women. I read somewhere, and I can't remember the source now, but apparently originally this was supposed to be a man, the main character, but they switched it to a woman. And I wonder if they like read the statistics somewhere and found out that it mostly happens to women, so they changed it to a woman.
Maybe, yeah. One thing that's interesting to me is that this movie actually, when it came out, had kind of a little controversy around it because people were so offended that Frankie, the main character who gets stigmata, is an atheist, whereas in the Catholic Church, stigmata is heavily associated with people of incredible, profound faith.
Right.
Like somebody getting stigmata, that is like approval from God being like, hey, you're religious enough, so I'm going to put holes in your hands.
Which is so weird. I don't get it. That's why, like, in the summary, I pointed out that it's actually not that she doesn't have stigmata officially. Like, it's not, who's it supposed to be? Jesus? God doing this? Is it the same person? I don't know.
Well, it depends on your views on the Holy Trinity, but that's a different podcast.
Guys, I'm Catholic, if you can even believe, theoretically.
Jesus is God's son who is also God.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, who's doing it? Jesus? Is that the theory?
I don't know.
It's weird. And like they didn't put that in the definition, that Jesus is the one doing this, because I guess they don't want to blame Jesus for wounding humans throughout history.
Jesus is like a tooth fairy who sneaks into your room at night and nails holes in your wrists.
Reported cases take various forms. They may show some or all 5 holy wounds. Some report tears of blood, which the movie uses.
I just want to clarify what the 5 holy wounds are. They are holes in your wrists, holes in your feet, scratches on your head from the crown of thorns,
Yeah.
whip marks on your back from being whipped, and a puncture wound in your side from the spear where they pierced Christ on the cross.
Right.
Just in case, there was anybody that didn't go to Sunday school growing up like me.
You did or didn't go?
Oh, I did.
You did,
Oh,
yeah.
I did. My first girlfriend in 2nd grade was the daughter of the church pastor. We were going to grow up and be co-pastors of the church together. Instead, I do this. I think she'd be very disappointed in me.
I hated Sunday school so much. My God. So some report tears of blood, which the movie uses, as well as recurring bleeding. The movie uses that as well. Wounds that don't clot yet never get infected. And some say the blood has a pleasant, perfumed odor known as the odor of sanctity.
So wait, just to get this right.
Yeah.
The symptoms are tears.
Of blood.
Bleeding just a whole bunch.
Just, yep.
Without like clotting or stopping bleeding.
Yep.
And smelling good.
Yes.
So this happens to women. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. Does that not make perfect sense to you?
Yeah.
No wonder it's 80%.
Saints who suffered were carefully watched day and night, and when that was done, a number of false stigmata were exposed. So basically, once they were like watched closely, they realized this is not really, you're not a stigmatic, you're like doing this to yourself.
I'm not trying to be like an obnoxious Bill Maher type here, but it is really interesting how the instances of these kinds of miracles happening has just absolutely plummeted in the digital age. Like
Right.
these kinds of miracles don't ever occur anymore.
Well, I think also dedication to religion is way different now than it was back in the day. I don't know.
Yeah,
People were
that's-
bored more often.
Totally fair, yeah.
Modern research links this to dissociative identity disorder, anorexia, because of other things that being anorexic can cause to your brain, and PTSD. So, science.
So now that we know what stigmata is, let's dig into this terrible movie about it.
Yes. So we begin with a sunrise. We have like runes, lettering for credits, which I was like, ooh, spooky. We start in Southeast Brazil.
Just real quick.
Very Buffy, very Charmed.
On the credits, the music for this movie was done by Billy Corgan.
Yeah.
Which I just wanted to point out because, good for Billy Corgan.
Smashing Pumpkins.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Homer Simpson smiling politely.
The town in Brazil is deeply religious. There's tons of people in the square. There's this like white guy with Matrix sunglasses who just clearly doesn't belong. And he goes into a church where all these people are silently praying. He talks to the priest and he introduces himself as the investigator. Another priest is dead, so this whole thing that's happening is a funeral. The investigator is also a priest. It's Father Kiernan.
And Father Kieran is played by Gabriel Byrne.
Yes.
Who I just want to say is born to play a priest. Like, I don't know what else he's been in, but like when I think of him, I see him as a priest. And maybe that's just because I saw this movie when I was like 12 and it influenced me. But something about Gabriel Byrne. He also gives off big vibes like Father Karras from The Exorcist.
Yes.
Both like the way they act and the way he looks. That's probably intentional.
He's there to investigate a statue of Mary. It is Mary, right?
Oh, yeah, it sure is.
That's crying blood. And he was sent by the Vatican. Is that right? This is the Vatican.
Yes, okay. He is sent by the Vatican.
There's also an alternate opening to this movie, which is that the priest, who's dead, commits suicide by jumping off the roof of the church. In the final cut, there's like no reason ever given for his death.
I mean, I would say that given that he is, spoiler alert again, given that he is the one possessing Frankie, maybe you could reason that he did it on purpose so he could die and then possess somebody to bring this issue to light. Because that was his goal the whole time.
Yeah.
But I feel like I get why they would cut that, because suicide is like the mortalist of mortal sins.
Right.
And I can't see a priest ever doing that.
Yeah. There's like whispering happening all of a sudden. Wind comes and blows out the candles. Pigeons burst out of nowhere from behind the statue.
Yeah, this scared you.
I fully jumped.
Yeah, this scared the crap out of you. And also, it's worth noting, they are very inside. It's not like this is kind of like a half-covered outdoor thing. Like, they are very
fully
inside.
Inside a church.
So many birds for inside.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on here?
Feathers from the pigeons fly down everywhere. And pigeons and doves appear in the Bible as animals fit to be offered to God. As described in Leviticus, they were one of the options for an atoning sacrifice for those who committed several types of sin or who had become impure. From the Jerusalem Post is where that's from.
Leviticus is the absolute worst book of the Bible. Leviticus is an Old Testament book that lays out all the things you can and can't do, and that's where we get a lot of the things like that, society's fighting about today.
Huh.
It also lays out, like, you can't wear mixed fabrics. It's like polyester. That's a sin.
Ooh.
Yeah. So Leviticus is
Is
just
that the one, too,
a
where, like,
book.
you can't eat shellfish and stuff like that?
Yes. So Leviticus 11, 9 through 12. These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters. Whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. They shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. Whatever hath no fins or scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you.
The intensity over a scallop.
So you not only can you not eat shellfish, but they're an abomination.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. It also says that a mother was required to bring a turtle dove after completing her purification period following childbirth. And per Wikipedia, a dove symbolizes the Holy Spirit. Symbolically, they're messengers of God's, and regardless of the message, peace always follows.
Okay, I don't know if I've talked about this in the podcast before, but this is something I've definitely talked to you about because I'm very passionate about this. Doves are trash. Doves are trash birds.
Doves?
Doves are just white pigeons. That's it. They're the exact same bird. They're just white. And like, we've got these pigeons and everybody hates them and they're flying rats, and then doves are supposed to be this peaceful, beautiful thing. No. Pigeons get so much hate and doves get all this love, and they're the same gross bird.
Well, I think that's why they seem to use pigeons and doves interchangeably here. And also in the movie, because sometimes I notice that it's like a pure white bird, and other times it's clearly like a pigeon. So I wanted to bring this up because pigeons and doves, whatever, are throughout this entire film. And I was like, what the fuck is with the birds?
Yeah,
this is what's with the birds.
There aren't even many attempted jump scares, and I would say I don't know if there are any successful jump scares.
No.
But like 4 attempted jump scares are birds just flying out of nowhere. all the time.
Honestly, I only was afraid because the sound quality. The sound of the fluttering wings is aggressively louder than anything else in the film.
Oh, yeah.
Stupid.
It would be like if I took a bag of chips and crumpled it right next to the microphone right now. That is what it sounded like.
The candles relight themselves, and Father Kiernan looks closely at the statue. He asks if it's been removed, and he dips a Q-tip into the blood. Someone yells out that it's the blood of Christ, and he requests that they box up the statue for it to be shipped. The priest there insists they can't because Father Alameda, he's the dead one, would never allow it. Meanwhile, a child goes up to the body and steals the rosary from a priest.
Okay, I am not religious, obviously, and I don't believe in ghosts, but still, I would never do that.
No.
That is the most awful thing you could do.
Yeah.
You are just asking for whatever kind of evil falls upon you.
Right. Yeah. He does run it out to the market for it to be sold, so, it's for money. In the market, a happy, touristy blonde woman is buying stuff, including the rosary. This I put together long after the fact. I did not know for so long who this woman was and what her significance was, or that she was buying a rosary. So she bought the dead priest's rosary. We get the movie title, we get rock music, we get more credits. So now we're shifting to 1999 Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and as they introduce Frankie, they kind of play this rock music over her, doing her thing. And it is so it's rock music, so she's too cool. It is definitely trying to throw a vibe that is patronizing.
Yes.
It is she is so cool with her rock music, she is too cool for Jesus. And we need to establish that right away, and that's how they do this.
Yeah. She's just a cool girl in the city. Her aesthetic is never been kissed look. She's a hairstylist. She parties hard with drugs and booze. She reminds me of Phoebe in the early days of Charmed, when Phoebe was kind of lost and didn't know who she was.
Everybody's going to get that reference.
And we see her at a club, and she takes a guy home who is a friend. She knows him, but they're fuck buddies basically.
They're at the club and they're talking, and she's like, "I'm so tired, I have to go home." And he's like, "Too tired to go home with me?"
Yeah. She has a massive kind of loft style apartment. Then it's the next morning when we see her in her apartment. So she's awoken by the phone ringing. Oh,
yeah. This apartment, I mean, even in 1999, there's no way she's affording this apartment. It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's humongous.
It's ridiculous.
And she's a not successful hairdresser.
Right. It's her mom, and her parents are on a trip, and her mom sent her a gift. It's a rosary, which is a weird gift for an atheist. She also talks to the friend that she slept with. She told him that she hates it when he just leaves, and he's like, "Why?" So that's where their relationship stands.
Well, I hate staying, so it's even.
First thing, so her mom is the one in the market in Brazil. So she has now gifted the stolen rosary to Frankie. Did you feel like this was made clear in the film, that that's what was going on? Am I just dumb? This is not a trick question.
I plead the fifth. No, you're not dumb, but I connected the dots. It was not it wasn't a question for me personally.
It just, okay, I think because the whole time I was it's not a priest doing this, it's Jesus. So I was what? I don't know. I just was confused until I put it all together.
Well, I mean, I think part of the reason you were confused is that this movie is terribly written.
Yeah.
That's probably, I would put less pressure on yourself.
So you've kind of already touched on this, but we've characterized who Frankie is very quickly. She works hard and she plays hard. She does drugs. She drinks. She has no faith. And maybe she's a little slutty.
And that's okay.
Right.
And I do want to say...
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No. I find it funny that you just made that Charmed reference, because literally at this point in the movie, you turned to me, you're like, this could have been an episode of a 90s show like Buffy or Charmed.
Yes, this could have simply have been a 2-part Buffy or Charmed episode. Frankie picks up the rosary to inspect it and immediately throws up. Talking to her coworker and bestie, Donna, she says that she's late on her period, and Donna is pretty chill about this.
And Donna is played by Nia Long, who is the stereotypical black best friend in this time period.
Yes.
And I love Nia Long, personally. That is not meant to be a slight at all. I absolutely love her. But she was typecast, I feel like, for a long time. And this movie was just that's Nia Long.
She tells her, don't worry about it. You have options because it's 1999 when Roe versus Wade wasn't being threatened all the time. Cool.
I do also just want to throw out that I feel like the type of personality that they've established for Frankie, if like somebody like wrote a note with the rosary that was like, this was stolen off a dead priest, I feel like she would have worn it. I feel like she would have been like, oh, this is so cool. And she would have taken the rosary.
Yeah.
But because she thought it was just like a regular rosary, she just dismissed it right out of hand.
So the pregnancy scare piece of this I found to be completely random and weird. I don't know what it was meant to tell us other than that she frequently has unprotected sex.
That's exactly what it was meant to tell us, yeah.
And therefore she doesn't make good choices.
And by the way, that's the movie's message. That's not that's not Brianna's message.
Well, unprotected sex is maybe a bad choice,
safe sex
but,
is yes.
Yeah.
But I think their presentation has more to do with the promiscuity side of it than
yes.
I definitely like made a note here that she is definitely not a millennial because she is just so nonchalant about this pregnancy scare. She's like, yeah, I'm a week late, and I'm thrown up in the morning, but whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like someone from our generation would be like, oh my God, my life is over.
Yeah. But I also think this is kind of setting up the idea maybe that she needs this. Like she needs a faith. And based on how this ends, I feel that is what's going on here. Like we said, the stigmata tend to be dedicated to Christ. So the experience itself is supposed to be an honor, right? I mean...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's like you get to like brag about that at the post-church gathering.
Yeah, the meal.
No, not the meal, but like... after the service, when you all go to like that one rec room and there's like a table with like cookies and stuff like that, you know exactly. Anybody who's been to any church knows exactly what I'm talking about.
I feel like the Catholics don't do that. I don't know.
No, you're right. Catholics don't. I'm sorry. I should.
We just go home in shame.
Yeah, I should have specified. Anybody who went to like a Protestant or Baptist church knows exactly what I'm talking about.
But so for Frankie, as someone who has no faith, this is maybe supposed to serve as her guiding light toward faith. Now, this would make me never care about Jesus, but
yeah,
I feel like that's what this is supposed to be doing.
So like the whole point of this movie is like this priest is possessing this woman to bring corruption to light, but at like the end of the day, it's still just like a priest who is involved in this religion using and terrorizing an innocent person to get out a message that she does not care about.
Yeah.
This is not a lesson at the end of the movie that you're going to go, oh, you know what? That's great. I'm glad that he did that.
Kiernan returns to Italy where he gets catcalled by sex workers until he shows them his collar. And that also reveals to us that he's a priest. We didn't know this before then.
Yeah, and it's so funny because, they're just like talking. He's like, no, thank you, no. And then like eventually he reveals his collar to get them and they all just like laugh. It's very funny.
They say, we'll give you the Vatican discount. That's hilarious.
Probably accurate. But yeah, the way that he like showed the collar was very funny to me. He must like kill it with the kids.
Oh my God. I like Father Kiernan. He's a cool priest.
Oh, I like him too, sure.
He reports his findings in Brazil to the cardinal, telling him that the blood tears were warm and human.
And the cardinal is played by Jonathan Pryce.
Yes.
Who you immediately recognized as Keira Knightley's father from Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yes. That's who he is forever.
And the cardinal's assistant is Enrico Colantoni, a.k.a. Sheriff Keith Mars. Always a pleasant surprise.
Right. Yeah, from Veronica Mars. Right. I forgot that he's a sheriff and not a detective. I thought he was just a detective.
He was a sheriff.
Yeah,
he used to be a sheriff.
The cardinal is not very interested in that, though, because Kiernan was apparently sent there to evaluate a reported face of Mary on a building. And Kiernan says he did that and it was just an optical illusion. So let's dive a little bit maybe into the history of sightings of Mary. Now, what I was looking for when I Googled this was people seeing Mary on toast, like we've heard in the past.
I saw this post on Reddit once where you could see the figure of Jesus Christ in a dog's butthole. And I know that sounds like a joke. It sounds
stunning.
Like sacrilegious, but I promise you it was actually pretty incredible.
It's Jesus's dog, obviously. So according to an article from the National Geographic, the vetting process for the sightings of Virgin Mary began in the 16th century. Oh, that's Jesus. He just showed me the butthole.
It's uncanny. Just Google.
Save that image. We'll put that on our social media. So yeah, Virgin Mary sightings are super old, and there have been about 2,000 sightings claimed since 40 AD. To be worthy of belief and support from the Roman Catholic Church, it must be deemed miraculous with a high degree of certainty and in line with church doctrine and found to have had a positive impact. So much criteria. There's essentially 5 categories. 1, recognized by the Vatican, which is after approval by a local bishop or Virgin Mary's appearance to a future saint. I don't know what that means. And on this little map that they showed on the National Geographic article, they had dots all over it. And there was about 16 instances of that. So that's like the lowest tier. Then there's number 2, approved by a local bishop. There were about 12 of those. Number 3 is expression of faith, which means visions are approved as worthy but not established as supernatural. 28 of those. Local tradition, which is that visions are part of local traditions but not formally investigated. There's several of those. So I'm already doing this backwards. So number 1 is like the top tier, like I said initially. That happens the rarest. And then as we go further down, they happen more and more often. Then number 5 is unconfirmed, which is that the apparitions are deemed supernatural but not yet investigated or are currently under investigation. And there are many, 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 many more of those. So yeah, that's just a little bit on the sightings of Mary. It goes way more involved into actually seeing Mary. Again, I was just looking for Mary on toast, and I couldn't find anything about that.
Because I'm pretty sure it was Jesus on toast.
Oh.
Yeah.
But either way, people see Mary and stuff too. I guess maybe Jesus is more.
For sure. There was like a viral thing, a while ago that was Jesus on a piece of toast.
Kiernan wants to go back to Brazil to assess the statue, and the cardinal is bothered that he didn't actually bring it back. They won't send him back, though, and instead they'll send a geologist, which just doesn't sound like the right scientist for this kind of job.
Yeah, so right off the bat, you get the impression that Cardinal is just like trying to make this go away.
Yeah.
He wants no part of it. And I was a little surprised by Father Kiernan's insistence at thinking this was an actual miracle, because I feel like that role in this kind of movie is often set up that he is a skeptic or a disillusioned priest and, he wouldn't necessarily believe. But this is actually a reversal of that pretty common dynamic where he's just like, no, like, we should investigate this. This could be holy. And the cardinal's like, nah, it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
And he also, like, calmly mentions they've had 60 crying statues in the last year. Like, that's terrifying. Yeah. Is that not a sign of the end times?
Right. So I think this Father Kiernan is very science-based, where he is getting more and more, and the more proof he gathers, like a scientist, the more he's going to believe the hypothesis, right? So he's gathering all of this information. He has these tears, which are warm and human. So, like, what the hell does that mean? So naturally, he's going to want to investigate this further. But all the cardinal cares about, as we learned, is headlines and this news getting out, and like the hype around that. That's really all he cares about.
Well, he's got to spend so much of his day relocating priests.
Right.
So he really has no time for this.
Position.
Yeah.
They disagree, and overall the cardinal is bothered that Kiernan can't decide between being a scientist and a priest. And to that I say, por qué no los dos?
Well, I mean, I don't want to rub anybody the wrong way or get too political here, but I think it's pretty well established that science and Catholicism don't always go hand in hand.
Right. Which is why, just like in The Exorcist, I was surprised that priest was a psychologist. I was like, what is going on here? Back to Frankie. She gets dropped off at home after work, and she's avoiding getting a pregnancy test. She's in the bath eating an apple. Candles are everywhere, and I will repeat that multiple times throughout this movie because the amount of candles that they invested in.
Have you never, go home after a long day of work, light 400 candles all over every room of your giant apartment,
with
and then
no metal trays underneath to collect the wax or stop a fire, no safety precautions.
And then you get in the tub and eat an apple.
Yeah,
that's how I want to end every day.
She very dramatically goes underwater and touches her stomach, which has a belly button ring and a tattoo around it. Welcome to 1999. So we pan over to the rosary that's just sitting on the desk. Wind blows, candles blow out. A single bird is flying, but this one sounded like 157 birds. This was the one that I was like, what is with the sound?
Yeah, that's what I wrote. This is the loudest fucking bird I've ever heard in my entire life. Is it one bird or is it 100?
She pops up from underwater and is surprised by the bird. A single feather falls, and suddenly she is yanked under the water. While under, we get cuts of wrists being nailed to the cross. So every time they do, when she gets one of the wounds, they do this very montage thing where they're almost like showing us it happening to Christ and then happening to her.
Yeah, and they're very quick cuts. Like, it's not long enough to be graphic or upsetting or anything.
Yeah.
You just see it very quickly. But this moment raised this question for me. When her mom called earlier and said she sent her this package, she's like, oh yeah, I've had that package for a while. She just never opened it. So, like...
Oh, yeah.
What is the level of interaction with the rosary that, like, was the package protecting her from the stigmata? Did she actually have to touch it?
Maybe.
But, like, her mom touched it. Well, like, we have conversations about movies sometimes.
Yeah.
Where, like, at the end of the conversation, we basically just realize, like, we've probably had more of a conversation about this than people did when they were making the movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is one of those situations. Because it doesn't matter. Ultimately, I'm being kind of nitpicky, and it's a detail that doesn't really matter. But it just bothers me. Like, the mailman... You know?
The boy who stole it?
The boy who stole it, exactly. But it just, like, this ghost priest was just waiting to find some spunky atheist in Pittsburgh.
Some spunky, slutty atheist.
Yeah.
The perfect one. Although, also, like, what would bring the publicity, maybe is what he was thinking, too, as a ghost rosary? I don't know. So she's bleeding from the wrists, and she's kind of stuck under the water like she's on the cross. So every time this happens, we get... her body is like she's on the cross. It happens with every wound. She's rushed to the hospital somehow. I don't know how, like, anyone comes across her. And as they're tending to her, she sits up suddenly and screams. Then she collapses and she's fine. The nurse tending to her wounds on her wrists, they're bleeding profusely, but she takes off the bandage and the blood just pours out. It's kind of gross.
Yeah, it's like very loosely wrapped gauze, and there's no like blood mark on the gauze, and then as soon as she unwraps it, it just starts gushing blood again. It's awful.
So it's like going back to the beginning, like, of defining a stigmatic, they'll just bleed like repeatedly, but not constantly. She looks at the wound and smiles, which was weird, like Frankie. The wounds don't hurt either. They're identical in size, and the doctor tells her that she missed the main artery by millimeters. And Frankie is confused by what's kind of being insinuated here, and she says, the nurse, well, we know that you did this. And Frankie's like, no, I love my life. Like, ask anybody.
Yeah, I love being me is what she says. And that I marked down as sign number 2 that she's definitely not a millennial. Also, during the scene, the doctor who's taking care of her...
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Brianna turns to me and says, is that Joan Cusack? That sounds like Joan Cusack.
She has a mask over her face, right?
Yeah.
And it's still, I was like, Joan?
And I didn't think it was Joan Cusack, but I definitely, like, got where you were coming from. And so we looked it up, and it was Anne Cusack, who is, the third sibling, who
There's
is
another acting
a little
Cusack.
lesser known, I guess. But I think that that's pretty interesting. You're like a bloodhound who can, like, sniff out Cusacks.
Returning to her apartment, there are candles and blood everywhere. Her tub is leaking, and Donna's like, let's just go to bed.
And they're talking about it, and I can't remember which one of them says it. It's either Frankie or Donna. They're like, it smells like jasmine or hyacinth or something.
Donna says that and then Frankie says she doesn't smell it.
Jasmine or hyacinth? If you said that to me, I'd be like, what does that smell like? I have no idea what that smells like.
It's floral. But that's the odor of sanctity. Back at the Vatican in the library, I guess, Kiernan and this other clergyman are discussing their jobs, I think. I did not focus on what they were talking about, but then I was like, I have to now point this out because he comes into play later.
He
this
does.
Other
and
clergyman.
They talk a lot about like faith and the nature of faith and religion and stuff. And there was one interesting line by the other, not Father Kiernan, but the other priest who said, quote, "We're all blind men in a cave looking for a candle that was lit 2,000 years ago." And I feel like that sounds like something a 14-year-old would write in a poetry book after being forced to go to church.
Yeah.
That is such angst.
Emo.
Like, again, peak 1999. It's great.
Well, and Kiernan explains his role as investigating miracles to disprove them, which is So depressing. Like, that's your whole job, is to investigate simply to disprove them.
I mean, your job is to be a buzzkill. Your job is to go to people who think they're having this profound, life-changing experience and be like, nah, it's just a gas leak, and ruin their entire fucking life. It's got to be a rough job.
The other clergy says he investigates gospels, saying that most of them are stories, dreams, and interpretations. Love that stance. Love it. Just... Frankie is going to work. Every scene to me is like Twilight because there's this constant blue hue. Whenever we're in Pittsburgh, it's Twilight for some reason. Also, it doesn't stop raining.
Out loud.
Like,
say it.
I know at least 2 people from Pittsburgh listen to this podcast, and I feel like it doesn't rain every single day, but it does in 1999. She gets to the salon, and Donna tells her that she's booked for the day. Her first client comes in, and she's just really distracted. She looks out the window and starts walking toward it. A woman is standing there in a blue raincoat, holding a baby draped in a red blanket. Pigeons fly around, and the woman starts crying and, like, holds out the baby. And now Frankie is watching what is... she assumes is about to happen is this woman is just going to drop a baby in the ground. And so she runs out screaming through traffic. When Frankie frantically reaches them, the blanket is on the ground and empty. And the woman stands there. She's not moving. And Donna, who doesn't see this woman at all, just takes her home.
This scene, I feel like, was supposed to be kind of a moment, but all I could think about this entire scene was, like, the clips that were in Patricia Arquette's hair and how bad it looked.
Yeah.
Oh, it was rough.
There's 2 ideas that I got from IMDb people, which is that, 1, this is supposed to represent the Virgin Mary. We have the blue raincoat, the blood of Christ.
So is Virgin Mary just dropping baby Jesus into traffic?
Yeah, I don't get that part.
Yeah. I'm not questioning you.
No, I know. It's... that part is just like, let's make it dramatic.
Yeah.
2, it represents Frankie, which apparently Frankie has this exact raincoat that is seen casually in another scene at her house.
Oh, so is this like an anti-abortion thing?
That's what I immediately assumed. But it's supposed to be like representing her possible pregnancy. And later, Father Kiernan says that stigmatics suffer torture of their demons. And this is her current like demon or vulnerability, which is to abort or not, if she is in fact pregnant. Those are just kind of 2 schools of thought for this.
Well, that makes the scene make a little more sense. I like that.
It's never addressed again.
Yeah, no.
Nothing like this ever happens, but whatever. On the train on their way back to her apartment, there's...
Yeah, they're on the subway.
There's 2 nuns, and she leans over and looks at them. She's not happy that they exist. She also spots a priest, and she's perturbed by him. She gets up and walks toward him and says, "Hey, are you Andrew Kiernan?" And he's like, "No, I'm Father Gurney. How can I help you?" She says, "No one can help me now. I'm fucked."
And then she like grabs his like crucifix and like tosses it.
No, she grabs it off a nun.
Oh, that's what it's right.
Just reaches over to the nun, grabs her rosary, and throws it across the train.
But like the way she throws it was so half-hearted. Like to me, like it didn't display anger. It wasn't like, it was just like, eh.
This is trash.
Get this
I feel like
outta
is
here.
what she was saying. Which, why is the priest making her like this? The dead priest. I don't get it.
But also, like...
Or Jesus. Why is he making her like this?
I don't know what Pittsburgh public transportation is like. I feel like this is just like, if you're a priest on the subway, like, you probably see this all the time. Like, oh, some strung out lady, like, God can't help me now. Like, this is just part of your day.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't even notable.
But what's not part of his day is that the train suddenly goes wild. There's, like, almost a growling sound, and suddenly Frankie is being whipped. The priest watches this completely aghast, and she holds onto the hand grabs that you can, like, grab onto if the train suddenly stops. And that's how it looks like she's on the cross, because her feet are down, her arms are out, as she's just being whipped by obviously an unseen whip. Back to the hospital she goes, and she's getting stitches. They tell her they're keeping her there for observation. They've run tests, and essentially there's no clue what's going on. But they eventually suggest to her that maybe it's epilepsy, because hearing voices and hallucinations are signs of that.
There was a scene with this doctor that I laughed at very hard, and you didn't laugh, but his bedside manner was terrible.
I have that here.
And or acting. But, they have this conversation where she says, "Am I pregnant?" He says, "No." She goes, "Was I?" He just goes, "I don't know." And that's it.
Yeah.
Like, he doesn't elaborate. He doesn't show any, empathy or anything. He's just like, "I don't know."
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Not my problem.
And again, I just feel like that's more like shame. Like, she doesn't even know if she could be pregnant, maybe. But also, this, like, 2 signs of epilepsy that she might have here. This is essentially entering your symptoms into WebMD and getting 2 out of 25 symptoms back. And you're like, yes, it's a brain tumor. Like, this doesn't make any sense, but whatever.
Well, I mean, I think that you're implying that this doctor is dismissive of this woman's issue and just putting the bare minimum effort into diagnosing her. And I don't appreciate that implication.
I think there's science to back that.
No. Ridiculous.
At the Vatican, the cardinal says there's no record of the church in Brazil with the Bleeding Mary. And instead they discuss Frankie because her experience has now made headlines.
Yeah, let me just elaborate on that real quick. Just to be clear, this cardinal is saying to Father Kiernan, we have no record of that church ever existing.
Right.
And again, he shows no concern about that. He shows no, like, oh, that's weird, we should look into this. He's just like, no, that church doesn't exist. Anyway.
Yeah, I think it's almost like, so the Catholic Church is the leader, obviously, of all the official Catholic churches. So it's almost like this is an unofficial gathering of people. We don't monitor them because they're not officially Catholics.
Like that Russian McDonald's. Like when McDonald's shut down in Russia and they launched that competitor. Yeah, like that.
Kiernan doesn't see how this is important, but it is because the Catholic Church only cares about appearances. So at the salon, they're talking about Frankie until she walks in and they're all like, hey. A client is waiting, one who is usually for Frankie, and when she calls her over, the client opts to wait for someone else. So she goes to the back and they all start pss about her again. She shouts, "Stop whispering like this is a goddamn church," as Father Kiernan walks in. She's very sassy to him, offering him a tattoo or a nipple piercing, but he says that he'll start with just a trim. So, by the way, her hair salon is also a tattoo parlor and a piercing parlor. As she cuts his hair, he says his name, and she says, "This is strange, but I've been expecting you." He tells her he works for the Congregation for the Causes of the Saint and asks her what church she goes to. So they left the salon and started talking. She tells him no church because she doesn't believe in God. And at that point, he has all the data he needs because, as he shares, stigmatics are extremely religious and there's no exception to that. This is only an occurrence in deeply devoted people. But so her wrists under the table start bleeding again, which is another sign. Ultimately, he tells her that this experience is a gift from God, and she asks if she can give it back. And then she shows him her wrists, which he dismisses because as far as he's concerned, this whole case is closed. So she's not a stigmatic. Then she shows him something that she found in her apartment on her table that we never saw until now. That's in her handwriting, but she doesn't know what it says. And he tells her that it's written in Italian. She gets mad, though, because ultimately he's not helping her, and she storms off. Now, angry and upset, she just goes to a club later, and Donna is a little concerned, saying she thought she'd be maybe relaxing at home. And she lashes out a bit, saying that God is doing this, and it sucks to believe in God.
So this scene and the scene before it,
yeah,
she just seemingly gets so angry. Like, she goes from 0 to 100 in the blink of an eye. And it was so just like... It seemed fake. Like, it was... I wrote, this was the point in the movie where if, we were watching it for fun, I'd probably turn it off. I'd be like, all right, this isn't going to get any better. I'm done with this.
Well, I think it was supposed to be, because she's possessed.
I guess.
The anger of the possession is coming through.
But, why did she even come out? Why did you go out that night? She's that friend at the club who's just like, this is fucking terrible, and I hate it here, and I never should have come out tonight. It's like, you begged us to come out, okay?
Well, her night is over because the crown of thorns comes at this moment while in the club. She starts bleeding out of her forehead. She runs out into the street. She dodges cars, causes multiple accidents as Donna chases after her. She runs back to her apartment, but she sees Father Kiernan is there at the door, so she runs away from him down an alley, and he chases her down the alley because he sees that she's bleeding from her head. Pigeons fly, newspapers blow everywhere, and there's whispering. Steam, like, aggressively bursts out of gaskets.
I was going to ask about that. I've never lived in, like, a real city, but, like, that's a movie thing. Like, that happens all the time in movies.
I've never lived in a city enough to see that happen. I don't know.
All right. Well, any of our city listeners, I know
any
they're
of our
like
Pittsburgh listeners. Is this a Pittsburgh thing?
Yeah. Do you guys have just like steam vents in alleys all over the city? Like it is excessive.
But it wasn't even the steam out of a vent. It was literal pipes that the tops were bursting off of, and like steam was just blowing out of them. A fire escape ladder comes clanging down. Windows shatter. At this point, I was like, devil or Jesus? What is happening? Like, who has possessed her? Because, again, I didn't know that it was the priest. She breaks a bottle and she starts scratching something into the hood of an abandoned car. Her face and eyes change, and she starts yelling in another language. Then she collapses and cries.
The sound of the glass on the car hood was awful. And I also just want to point out, like, if this were real life, I feel like at this point in the movie, Frankie would have been involuntarily committed somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, after causing these accidents,
sure.
like, having this crazy breakdown in the alley, like, she would be brought to a doctor and prescribed a vibrator for hysteria or something, and nobody would have ever heard from her again.
Donna reaches them, and Frankie lets Father Kiernan take her off the car. He brings her to a church, the one that the other priest on the train is from, and he, like, cleans her wounds, and she rests.
That's another thing, though. Like, Frankie, her best friend, is just like, hey, I'm going to leave you at this church with these two priests, even though, like, atheism is, like, the biggest thing about your personality.
Yeah.
Okay? Like, yeah, I'm going to leave you with these two guys that you just don't even know. Bye.
Well,
like,
it's probably like, you inherently trust a priest, right? Right? He had recorded what she yelled, and so he listens to it, and he sends it to that older clergyman at the library for translation, because this is basically what he specializes in. Later, Frankie is awake and goes to the church to look at Jesus on the cross, and she notices that the nails go through his hand while her wounds are through the wrist. Father Kiernan comes around, and she is like, this is wrong, mine are through the wrist. And he explains that they've since learned that the hands wouldn't have been able to hold up a body during a crucifixion.
Crucifixion, yeah.
And so it had to be done through the wrist.
And I was pleasantly surprised that they addressed this, because that was something that bothered me. Like, I knew that explanation. Like, I knew that it was likely through the wrist because the hands couldn't. But
have they updated that? Like, do they make new Jesus on the cross through the wrist?
I have no idea. I actively, crucifixes, like, I'm not, look, if faith works for you, that's great. I'm not trying to clown on that. But just that image of Christ on the cross, and like the crucifix necklaces with Jesus hanging on them, it creeps me out.
Yeah,
I want no part of that ever.
Yeah,
so
he later learns the language she was speaking was Aramaic, a dialect used in the time of Jesus, but hasn't been used for hundreds of years.
And that is like every single religious horror movie ever, somebody is speaking Aramaic.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Meanwhile, Frankie goes to the roof, and there's whispering, and she's kind of sitting there contemplating, and then she stands up and she looks down, but she doesn't jump.
Again, clearly not a millennial.
So this is the only scene or time of possible suicidal thoughts for her, but I do wonder if this was to mirror the original opening, where Father Alameda commits suicide by jumping off the roof of the church. She's possessed by him, so maybe this is like a piece of him.
That makes way more sense.
Yeah. The next day, or I don't know how far later, Donna calls her from the salon, but she doesn't answer. Kiernan rings her bell, but no answer. So he just slips in when someone leaves. And he finds her writing on her walls, and he just starts taking pictures.
Real quick, though, how did she get home alone? After all this, like, she just, like, went home alone and nobody was like, hey, maybe I should stay with you or something.
Again, that's why I, like, don't know how much time passed. Because I feel like he took her home and then was like, I'll be in touch. And then it's 3 days later. I don't know. It's not English, what she's writing, so he says, who are you? And she turns around, definitely possessed. She looks like shit.
Okay, so this actually made me think, why is it, like, in every single movie where somebody gets possessed, they immediately just have super dry skin? When you're possessed, does the ghost just like suck up all the moisture in your body?
Yeah, it's like sucking your energy.
It's gross, but that is like the hallmark. Like that is how you can tell somebody's possessed is they turn around, they've got really dry, cracked lips, and their face is all ashy.
And she says, not in her own voice, the messenger is not important. Her eyes roll into the back of her head, and she walks very slow, like an elderly person, to her bed and lays down.
Also, like, I noticed during this scene when she, like, moves over the bed, she's wearing, like, giant platform sandals with socks, which I just hated. Just really hated that.
There's a leak coming through directly onto her head as she lays down. The leaks continue to happen through this apartment. Before this misery started, she had no leaks. So I don't understand WTF the leaks. I don't get it.
Well, it's all the rain. Obviously, they're in the midst of a monsoon, and the constant pressure from the rain is wearing down on the building, so leaks are getting in.
I guess. I don't know. Anyway, the water running on her face makes her face turn to normal, and she cries, I feel my heart is breaking. Why am I so sad?
See, to circle back to my last point, she moisturized and she's not possessed anymore.
Then she says, it smells like flowers in here, like jasmine or rose. And the priest smells it too.
I thought more like hyacinth.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Vatican is pissed that another newspaper has picked up the story. And to them, this means that Kiernan is failing. His job is to quiet this down, and he's not doing that. So they're going to call him back. While Kiernan looks at the writing on the wall, Frankie is like happily feeding pigeons from her window until he asks her about the wall. She says she has no clue, and she storms out, and he follows. So she's just like annoyed. Stop asking me about this. I don't know what's going on.
She says, you know, for a priest, you're pretty relentless.
Really?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's a line that would be co-opted by many, many altar boys.
Oh my God.
Okay, I'm sorry. I will stop. I'm going to try to stop. I'm going to make an effort to stop. This is the point in my notes where I even realize, like, I'm going to need to apologize to any religious listeners. I know it's not funny, but it's a little funny, right? So I apologize.
She goes to a flower market, and he catches up and apologizes. I don't know for what, I guess being insensitive. Then they sit at a table, and she asks what kind of priest is a scientist, and he says that he's an organic chemist. She lights a cigarette, takes a puff, and immediately puts it out in an ashtray. This is the second or third time this has happened, that she lights a cigarette, takes a puff, and immediately puts it out. And the camera always zooms in close on her putting out the cigarette. And I need to know, what does that mean? What are you trying to tell us? Why are you showing us this? Who lights a cigarette, takes a puff, and immediately puts it out? What is that?
Maybe it's one of those things where, like, you know, people quit smoking, but they always carry a pack of cigarettes with them or something. So maybe she, like, quit smoking, but she needs to do that every so often. Like, as a former smoker, I totally get it.
And we're just supposed to know that, like, she's a former smoker and she's doing this? It's so stupid.
Yeah, that's definitely the only issue with this movie.
They talk about his personal life, and he says that he wasn't born a priest, as in to say that, like, he's been with women, I'm pretty sure, but simply traded one complication for another.
Women are so complicated.
and like, there's touching, and at this point I was like, is this a love story? What is happening?
Yeah. And so, you know, here I am, obviously not enjoying this movie. I have no emotional investment in any of these characters, these events or whatever, but it's still just like, it kind of made my skin crawl a little bit. I do not want to see a romantic subplot with a priest. Like, I just don't. No. I don't know why it bothered me so much, because obviously, like, I don't care if a priest is chaste or not, but, like, I don't know, it just seemed forced. It seemed weird. Like,
yeah.
This was definitely a time period where I feel like, and you know, we're still kind of in the middle of that time period, but I feel like we try to force romantic subplots into pretty much every single thing that we consume, every, you know, TV show, book, movie. And we've gotten a little bit better about it. I feel like we've made some progress over the last, 10 years or so. But this definitely seemed a prime example of that to me. Like, a producer is just like, we need to get this a little sexy. We need to put a little intrigue in here.
Yeah. Well, I have an interpretation of the ending, and I feel like this is supposed to start that. Like, as if to say, he's not sure that he wants to be a priest, and maybe isn't going to continue to be a priest. Like, I feel like this is the introduction to that. And the only way to do that for them was to be like, love story.
And this is also the point in the movie where I kind of made a note about the writing being bad. Like,
this was the point.
Yeah, okay. Well, no. So here's my thing. Like, obviously we're not professionals. And I'll clown on a movie sometimes for having bad writing or scenes sounding like stilted or whatever. But oftentimes, like, I'll watch a movie, I'll enjoy it well enough, and then I'll read like a review or a comment or something that comments on the writing, and it'll just mention that the writing was bad or something like that. But like, at no point during watching it did that cross my mind. So I feel like when it crosses your mind while you're watching it, it must be atrocious.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it was so bad. So Gabriel Byrne in this was actually nominated for a Razzie.
Yes.
For Worst Actor. And this is coming full circle because bad writing made me think of another movie that had infamously terrible writing. And so, Brianna, he lost that Razzie to Ahmed Best in 1999. Do you know who Ahmed Best is?
No.
So you don't know who he played or what movie?
Mm-mm.
The Sixth Sense finished second in overall box office rankings for 1999. Do you know the number one movie?
Mm-mm.
Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
Oh.
Ahmed Best
Is the Phantom Menace?
Jar Jar Binks.
Oh, everyone hates him.
Everyone hates him. So,
yeah.
We've watched the Clone Wars together, I believe. Some of the worst writing I've ever seen in any movie ever. Like, the lines are terrible. The way they're delivered is terrible. I love Natalie Portman and Hayden Christensen, but guys, like,
awful.
That movie was not it for you. And that's what this immediately reminded me of, because I remember watching that and very similarly going, what the fuck? This is not the way people speak at all. And it turns out, came full circle. He lost to Ahmed Best. So I just thought that was a fun little tidbit.
Well, at this point, the nails and feet happen. And back to her apartment, he like cleans her up. The candles are lit again. So while she's bleeding out, they had plenty of time to light a bunch of candles. This is the 4th wound, and he tells her the 5th is the final wound because that's what killed Jesus. But not to worry, because no stigmatic has ever received the final wound. He explains the smell of flowers has historically accompanied the wounds, and he talks about the first stigmatic. He was a priest who suffered through many years but lived to old age. He only had 2 wounds, though. So this doesn't really match what the first stigmatic was. The first stigmatic was Saint Francis of Assisi, which, by the way, Francis. Ooh, parallels.
And they also mention it in this scene, too, I believe.
Yeah,
Father
so I
Kiernan
think
says.
based on what I read, I think they're combining Saint Francis of Assisi, who is the official first one, but also the Padre Pio of Pietrelcina. He's the one who had the wounds last for a really long time and never got infected. So I feel like they're just combining kind of lore here to explain this stuff. You can read that on Catholic.org.
Nice plug. They're not paying us for that promotion either.
They're definitely not paying us. She takes this as bad, though, because she has double the wounds of this other stigmatic, and she's like, this is killing me. Like, she just feels like in her bones that this is going to be it. Father Kiernan talks to the clergyman about the photo that he sent him, so the photo of the, Aramaic language on the wall. And this other clergyman, the one from the library, he's like really anxious that someone will see him or hear him discuss this, because as soon as he sees the image, he's like, don't send me any more photos. He says that it reads, a kingdom of God is inside and all throughout you. He tells Kiernan about a cover-up from a few years ago, that this is essentially the last gospel, which are actual words between Jesus and his disciples. And the investigation was shut down because Jesus's true gospel basically says that you don't need the church or any organized religion to live by his teachings.
Yeah, so for anybody not familiar with the Bible, the story of Jesus is told through his apostles, basically. And there is no book that was written by Jesus or anything like that. And that is supposedly what they had found here, was a book in Jesus's own words.
Right.
And I don't know how they could verify that, but it was verified.
Yeah. While he's telling this to Kiernan over the phone, the cardinal's sidekick, Veronica Mars's dad, he overhears this. So the other clergyman deletes all the images from the computer, but this guy goes over to the computer and re-downloads them. And he sends them over to the cardinal.
Did you ever watch that cartoon Recess when you were younger?
No.
There's a character in Recess who, his name's Randall, and he's a snitch. And anytime anything happens, he writes down a little notebook and he runs to tell Mrs. Finster, the teacher. And I got big Randall vibes from
yeah, totally.
From Mr. Mars in this scene.
Also, Kiernan sees the reflection of a man in the mirror in the photos, and the clergyman calls a fellow priest in New York, I think. referencing that the gospel has been found, and they refer to Father Alameda, the dead priest from the beginning.
And that is also who you see in the mirror.
Yes, exactly. The clergyman, the librarian one, he takes a photo of 3 priests and hides it in the drawer. Now, I think the 3 priests are this clergyman, Father Alameda, and this other one from New York. By the way, at the funeral for Father Alameda, he had on his casket the same photo. So, like, these 3 are in cahoots somehow. Basically, they were the 3 investigating the Gospels. Kiernan goes back to Frankie's loft. She offers him a beer, and he accepts. Her wounds are also healing. She's, like, very much in better spirits. As he checks her head, she rubs her face against his hand, but he steps away.
Icky.
He notices that she painted over the wall in red, and she says that she got sick of looking at it. She also takes hold of his hand and kisses him.
Ew.
He steps away, and she tries to coerce him. He rejects her, and now she gets mad. It becomes clear, though, that she is possessed because she gets violent. Her voice changes. They, like, physically fight. She throws his body around, including over the tub, which remains full of water. She grabs a knife and threatens him, but ultimately reopens her own wrist wounds. Disgusting.
Icky.
Frankie collapses on the bed, but the whole thing moves, like, aggressively, and then levitates. Or she levitates. She's pushed up, like, almost like she's standing in the air, and her arms are out straight. The sun beams through, but still covered in a blue light, as she hangs there like Jesus on the cross. After a moment, he walks over to her, holds her, and, like, she comes down. He puts her in bed, rebandages her wounds, and takes the rosary, the one her mother bought, and prays over her. Frankie says, "I've never seen you pray," and he says that he hasn't in a very long time. She tells him to get in bed. She's like, "It's fine, don't worry about it," and they lay together. Meanwhile, the Vatican crew shows up like the friggin' FBI. They kind of just burst through the door, like Frankie doesn't lock her door. The cardinal says that they've come to help, but we know that's not true. They end up taking her probably, I think, to like the Archdiocese of Pittsburgh. That's kind of what it seems like. And they leave her with nuns in a bedroom. They question Kiernan about the photo. They argue because they believe Kiernan is not being loyal to the church. Ultimately, they make him leave, saying that he needs to go rest because he hasn't slept in days.
And if this movie were made today in a post-social media world, the Cardinal would already know that there's no such thing as loyalty because of all those great informative Tom Hardy memes. That joke will play, don't worry.
Kiernan goes back to the church, and the priest from New York shows up. He tells him this is the gospel of Jesus. It's his instructions on how to continue the church, and that if it gets out, it would destroy the modern church. He says, you know, this church is just a building. When the kingdom of God is inside you, you don't need priests and churches.
Yeah, and that's a message I can get behind.
Yeah. I've always said that.
Cultivate your personal relationship with God. You don't need to be in any particular building to do that. You just talk to him yourself.
It's very Exorcist, though, for a girl to have to become possessed in order to teach a priest that, you know, his faith is in him. Kiernan also reports to this other priest that Alameda is dead. I think they basically put together that this isn't a true case of stigmata, which most aren't, so interesting, but rather a possession to get the message out. So really, Alameda should have just written all of this down somewhere to avoid this. For
real, like, talk to a reporter. You could have just talked to a reporter. Easier. That's all you had to do.
Back to Frankie, though, the cardinal, his helper, Veronica Mars' dad, and the nuns go to her room to, like, perform an exorcism. The nuns hold her down, and the cardinal trickles the smallest specks of holy water on her, which, like, what is even the point? The demon says that the cardinal is the true enemy of the church. Then he makes everyone get out, and he strangles her, saying he will not destroy my church.
That's a fun fact. Like when they go through that pope selection process and the white smoke comes out and stuff, before they give you your pope hat, you have to strangle an atheist to death.
Oh my God.
Sorry, Catholic listeners, again.
They can take a joke. This whole movie is...
A joke?
Offensive.
This whole movie is a joke.
Kiernan bursts through, though, and pulls him off of her. He says he knows everything and that he spent his last days in the church. Wahaha. In Frankie's room, it's now engulfed in flames, and engulfed is not even a strong enough word. Kiernan is like, are you Paul Alameda? Give me your wisdom. Let me be your messenger. Which, again, very Exorcist, to just try to take on the quote-unquote demon. She whispers that the kingdom is inside him, and Kiernan blesses his soul and tells him to go in peace. This was so simple. Like, it's over. All of her wounds are, like, all of her wounds happen again, and she collapses on the bed, but the flames recede like water, and it's over.
Yeah, they don't even, like, show him getting her out of the burning room.
Yeah, they do. He carries her out.
No, but what I mean is, like, you see him pick her up, and then you see him holding her outside.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
That's it.
Yeah.
Like...
But how does the priest, Alameda, how does he know that it's done? Like, that the job is done? I don't know. It was very abrupt. He carries her out wrapped in a white sheet, holding her rosary, very Jesus-like. They're outside in the garden, and there are statues of saints all around. Her wounds are now gone, and she wakes up. He's cradling her in his arms, and she caresses his face and kisses him. Then she gets up, and doves land on her hand. She smiles, and the dove flies away. She looks at the statue, who are also, like, draped in fabric, just like she is. The statue she was looking at was Saint Francis of Assisi, by the way.
I had a feeling. I wrote a note about that. I had a feeling it would be.
So this whole scene is very kind of light and ethereal, and I think it's supposed to say that, like, she's a saint now, it seems like.
Saint Frankie from Pittsburgh.
Yeah. So what did you think of this ending? Basically, like, she gets up, she looks at the statue, she walks away, and he's, like, smiling.
And they kiss.
Yeah, but after that, like, what do you make of this? Like, what do you think? Is Frankie dead or alive? Or, like, what do you think happened here?
I honestly, if I'm being 100% honest with you, I didn't think about it at all because I was so fucking done with this movie. I did not want to put anything other than the surface level thought into it. I think what I kind of got from it was that, you know, Frankie is no longer an atheist and she now recognizes God, and Father Kiernan is going to lead this revolution of, you know, the population of the world getting in touch with God without the corruption of the church. And that's supposed to be the way it ends. But
well, I have a little thing about the ending, but there is an alternate ending to this movie where Frankie fully dies.
Cool.
So this scene basically is her dying, and, like, the alternate ending is that her walking away is her spirit, but her body remains in the priest's arms.
Huh. I think it would have been cooler, dare I say, if she died and then came back to life, mirroring Jesus on the cross. That makes too much sense.
Right?
See, I could have written this movie. That took me 4 seconds.
The official ending, though, is almost like an epilogue here. We go back to Brazil. Kiernan looks at the same statue of Mary, which is no longer bleeding. He opens up a piece of the floor. Like, something on the statue directs him to this piece of tile on the floor. He opens it up, and he finds the lost gospel. Very Da Vinci Code ending.
Yeah, and then he just, like, picks it up with his bare hands.
Yeah.
Like, you just ruined those scrolls. They're going to disintegrate.
But also, he's not dressed as a priest. He's there, like, quote unquote, as a civilian. So I feel like he's no longer a priest.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's no longer a priest because the church doesn't need to exist anymore. That's the whole purpose of the message.
I thought the whole point was, like, he has gone through and been like, no, I'm a scientist, not a priest.
No, I think it's more that, you know, the message of this gospel that the cardinal was trying to cover up is that you don't need the church. The kingdom of God is around you at all times, and you can have your relationship with God without getting the church involved. And so I kind of took that as, you know, he sees that, you know, he doesn't need to question his faith because he still believes in God. He still has that relationship with God, but he no longer needs the church to be the conduit because God is all around him.
Well, before the credits roll, there's words on the screen that say, in 1945, a scroll was discovered to be the closest to Jesus' gospel, and the Vatican refuses to acknowledge it other than calling it heresy. So I guess that's, like, the inspiration for this movie. So I had to Google that because I feel like I've never heard of this. And how has that not changed the world? How has it not changed everything we know to exist, to have discovered this?
Well, I mean, again, I'm not trying to, you know, be like Bill Maher here because he's obnoxious, but if this gospel actually existed, I mean, would it surprise you to find out that, you know, higher ups at a church suppressed it because it would remove all their power? That's exactly what would happen.
I know, but people know about this. We all have the internet now. It's easy to find this kind of information. And like, how does that not change your belief system a little bit? I know this is like a huge topic.
Again, not to get too political, but I think the last 6 years have taught us that a lot of people will believe a lot of things in the face of evidence that says otherwise.
Facts. Well, I did some researching on this, and this is from the Christian Research Journal. In December 1945, while digging for soil to fertilize crops, an Arab peasant found a red earthenware jar near Nag Hammadi, a city in Upper Egypt. Inside the jar were 13 leather-bound papyrus books dating from approximately AD 350. And although several of the texts were burned or thrown out, 52 texts were eventually recovered through many years of intrigue involving illegal sales, violence, smuggling. The complete collection was not made available in popular format in English until 1977 and was released as the Nag Hammadi Library, reissued in revised form in 1988. So many of these documents have been referred to and denounced in the writings of early church theologians, but most of the texts themselves have been thought to be extinct. Now many of them have come to light, and there's this book by Elaine Pagels, The Gnostic Gospels, where she says, now for the first time we have the opportunity to find out the earliest Christian heresy. For the first time, the heretics can speak for themselves. So I did so much Googling. I was like, what is Gnosticism? What is heretics? What is heresy? I thought heresy was like treason, but it's really just like what Jesus followed was heresy. Jesus is a heretic.
Well, he was a heretic because he was going against the established church at the time. He was a heretic because the Jewish church at the time was like the religion, and he was saying, no, the church is wrong, and questioning the church, that is heresy.
Yeah. So anyway, if you're interested in that, Google it. It was interesting to me. It was confusing to me. It's like a whole other, that's for a different podcast, not ours. But so about the ending, this is from a blog called Funk's House of Geekery. And it says that time a director couldn't choose an ending, so he didn't. And he says, from time to time, I've made notes on an article about movies from the 90s that have been forgotten, which is challenging because I don't remember them. And this would be featured. Not because it's good, it's not. But it was intriguing and built up a fair amount of interest before completely tanking and slipping into the realm of obscurity. Which just validates what you said about it becoming like beating out. What movie? What did it beat out?
The Sixth Sense.
The Sixth Sense. And then was like never heard of again. Now to the strange aspect of the ending. There were two versions edited together, seemingly from the same footage. Throughout the movie, it has been reinforced that if our lead character received the 5th stigmata wound, it would kill her. But only the most pious believer would receive this, and it's never happened. In the rather weak conclusion of the film, Arquette collapses into the arms of co-star Gabriel Byrne and appears to be suffering the final wound. She stands up and walks away. The end. It's a pointless and confusing ending, but the director preferred the alternative version. In this version, Arquette collapses, Byrne watches her walk away, and then looks down to see her dead. It was her soul leaving. This is an even more perplexing ending that leaves things frustratingly ambiguous about the real meaning of the movie. We suspect that there was a disagreement between Wainwright and the studio when it came time to put out the home video release. Do we put the slightly more upbeat but more confusing and pointless ending, or the grimmer, also confusing ending? Do we kill the main character or not? It's a tough question and not one that any creative type could expect to be answered, so they didn't.
I guess that's one way to solve the problem. You know, we've all been writing a story and go, how am I going to end this thing? And this guy was actually genius enough to go, you know what? I don't have to. That said, I'm going to disagree with this article a little bit. I think if she, you know, and this could just be the way that I'm looking at it or interpreting it or whatever, but if that ending happened where she died, you saw her walk away and then he looks down and he sees that she's dead, I don't necessarily think that that's confusing. I think that means she died from the 5th wound, as was established throughout the movie, and then her soul leaving and walking away is her entering the kingdom of God as a true believer. Yeah. That makes perfect sense to me.
To me, it wasn't confusing, and I didn't feel like, he very much feels like there are literal two endings here being pieced together, and I didn't feel that when I watched it. It's not like, you see her body again. We see her kind of walk away. And that could mean anything. Like, is she just walking through because she feels free again? Or is she like walking, you know, to heaven? You never know. And like, to me, an ambiguous ending in that way is just up for us to interpret how we feel we want to, and not taking away from the rest of the film. Not to defend the writing of this film whatsoever, but I just thought his article was so funny, and it just kind of puts it all together how this movie is not good.
Trash.
All right, so let's talk about our scores for the film.
I think you can guess where I'm going to land on this.
Jump score.
0. Yeah.
Nightlight.
0. Though I just want to, I think I haven't talked about this at all this episode, and we've talked about this a little bit, and I just feel like this is something I want to get out there. This is something I want people to know about me. Mm-hmm. So, as I said, I went to church until I was 13, 14, old enough to have a choice, basically. And then, you know, I stopped. It was Baptist church, and, you know, we had the church, and then everything else, like, after the service was either in the, like, annexed building next door where we'd have that little after service reception,
or like the basement,
or right? The basement. Yeah. That's where like Sunday school was. And I used to be terrified of this basement.
Yeah, you've told this story before.
Did I tell it on the podcast though?
Yes.
Okay, I did.
There's something about a scary Jesus or something?
No, I was just afraid of the ghost of Jesus.
Oh.
There's nothing down there.
Well, Ghost Jesus is the scary Jesus.
Religious imagery to me, for whatever reason, since I was a kid, has been scary to me.
Yeah.
There's something that is creepy to me about Christ on the cross. Very, very scary to me. Thankfully, you know, the particular Protestant offshoot that I went to was more about just the cross itself and not necessarily the guy on it. But I just really want to point out that, like, this movie deals with something that is inherently scary to me and did not scare me at all. Didn't scare me.
Yeah.
So the Nightmare score being a 0 for this movie of all things, it didn't even like, and when I was 12, it didn't scare me either. I did not have nightmares from this movie as a kid either.
Yeah.
So I just really want to hammer that home because I'm not, you know, I'm not trying to shit on anybody. People put a lot of work into this movie, and just because we don't like it doesn't mean they didn't work hard. But my God, not even remotely scary.
Yeah. And what's your horror buff score?
I'm gonna give it a 2.
Okay.
Just because it can get worse.
Exactly.
So I feel like I shouldn't give it a 0 or a 1, even though I don't like anything about it, because it could have been worse.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a 2.
So Scaredy Cat is 0, but my neophyte is a 1. I gave it a 1 because I was like, there could be worse.
Yeah.
So, oh Lord, our next movie though, guys, I'm so scared. I am scared. You went to bed after me last night. I was scared in bed about the movie that we are about to watch, which means I haven't watched this movie yet, and I was already scared. This is gonna be awful. But we're gonna be watching Ouija: Origins of Evil.
Yeah, so that is a sequel/prequel to, you know, just a supernatural horror film called Ouija. That first Ouija film, not good. When we talked about what we were going to do, Ouija was brought up first, and I said, no. We have to do Origins of Evil. You know, much like Annabelle. The first Annabelle wasn't great, but then you've got those 2 Annabelle sequels that were good. They're creepy. Good story. This is very similar. You know, if you haven't watched it, you can watch Origin of Evil. You don't have to check out Ouija. There is no point. It's a fun movie. I'm excited to watch it again. I've seen it 2 or 3 times already. And I'm excited to dig in.
I am not. I'm so afraid. We have to watch it while it's still light out. Like, oh my God. All right. Thanks for listening to Go a Little Mad. Please be sure to follow or subscribe to us on your favorite pod platform and like us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Go a Little Mad Pod. Visit goalittlemadpod.com to continue the conversation about each episode, and you can help us spread the word with a quick review and a 5-star rating, or grab some merch from our TeePublic site, which you can also access on our website. Your sharing makes all the difference.
Tell your friends, you know, like leave a review, buy some merch, whatever. But more than that, just the most important thing, tell people. Tell your friends to listen to us. Tell them how funny I am. And if they're Catholic, maybe just tell them to skip this episode, you know. But this is a lot of fun. And just to reiterate, Brianna did mention this on Instagram, because our schedule was thrown off a little bit, the Ouija Origin of Evil episode will be next week. We won't be doing 2 weeks in between episodes because we want to stay on the schedule that we created for ourselves. So thank you for your patience, and we will be back next week with Ouija Origin of Evil.
Yes, if I survive.
You'll be all right.